Let's dive right in, I'll tear it apart. 4 chambers, let's look at them all. Twittriums and 2 ventricles. Left side big and right side is small. Count with me 4 blood vessels. Let me explain to you how this works. The songs really resonate with people and they remember the words of these songs. I want to reconcile science to this. The idea was on my mind. I benched it for a year. I didn't do anything for about a year. And then after a year, I thought, I've got to do this. TikTok wasn't even a thing when I first thought of it, that people really knew about. The pandemic hit. TikTok seemed to rise, seemed to be all about dancing and music. And I thought, it's now or never. This idea I had 12 months ago, I can't let it stretch any longer. I've just got to go all at it. So I started about a month-long process of taking the textbook set up on biology from cells, getting a song from Stormzy, and just continually writing and practicing until I had something decent.
My guest this week is Matt Green, who is a science teacher and a content creator. Matt has a degree in biochemistry from Kent University, a master's in neuroscience from Imperial College London, and he has a teaching certificate from Middlesex University. Matt was a high school science teacher with a specialty in chemistry for almost 10 years, and currently he is the owner of JGM Science Tutors and is a social media content creator known as the Rapping Science Teacher. Matt, welcome to STEM with Mr. N.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Can we just start off first by looking at those couple of qualifications that you had? Would you be able to explain what biochemistry and neuroscience are?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so biochemistry is the study of living organisms, cells, and looking at the chemistry of how things happen. So for all those that know what biology is, bio meaning life, and put ology on it, the study of, you're looking at living organisms, and chemistry, you're looking at chemicals and chemical reactions. And if you look inside living organisms and go down to the smallest element, which is a cell, things going on in that cell have reactions. And scientists, many experiments and years of research, we know many of these chemical reactions that take place. And biochemistry, to a degree, looks at that. So, for example, respiration in animals, photosynthesis in plants, they're very complicated biochemical pathways. And many of these have been mapped out through the study of that, and that's in biochemistry. Neuroscience, you asked as well. Yeah, that was what I did for my master's. That course studies the brain and the central nervous system. So essentially, it looks at all the structures of the brain, what areas of the brain are involved in certain processes, how the brain developed, and a part of the course also looked at sort of real life practical elements. So looking at people that had strokes, what parts of their brain are no longer working, and trying to map out what area of the brain that was involved in, what did that control in reality. And one thing I can say about neuroscience after studying it is there's a whole bunch about the brain that is just simply not known. And one of the most difficult things about studying the brain is that there's 2 ways of looking at it. You can look at a dead brain, which means you can, obviously the organism is dead, so you can cut the skull off, take the brain out, and you can look at it. You can look at it through a microscope in immense detail and see all the structures. But you don't know what's happening because it's not alive. And the other way of looking at a brain is when it's in the living organism, and you can scan it using a CAT scanner and MRI, and you can literally see as nerve cells are firing, it lighting up on a computer screen, and you can get an idea of what's going on. But the resolution compared to microscopes is very low. So you've got 2 sort of bad scenarios. You can look at a dead brain in great detail and not know what's going on, but look at a live brain with very low resolution and see sort of patterns. But yeah, it's a fascinating subject, and that's why I studied it.
And both of those degrees sound fascinating, and most of the people that I've spoken to that do degrees like that then carry on and go into research and working for companies doing that. Why did you decide to go to be a high school science teacher with that specialty in chemistry?
It's a good question. So for me, as much as I've always loved science, I've always considered myself a people person. I always like working with people, doing projects with people. Could be selling, could be whatever it is. I always like working with people. And in research, it can be quite sort of lonely in a lab and sitting along for hours and hours and hours. and as much as I like science, I have done a little bit of research in my master's, and it's not something I can see myself doing day in, day out. Whereas in teaching, you're dealing with teachers all day, you're dealing with students all day, and no 2 days are the same. It's always interesting. I'm not in the classroom anymore myself now, but I had a fantastic 10-year period there. And if there was less admin and marketing involved, I think I'd have found a way to still be in it. But that for me, it was an ability to speak about science, still be doing science, but having the people part there, and it's not just about liking people and dealing with people. With the fact that I like helping young people, and when you've got young people in front of you and they don't get the subject and they're really struggling, and you can explain it in a way that sort of ignites something, and they really get it and they understand, and they feel confident. You see the confidence growing, you see their learning improving. Something that you don't get from, in my opinion, other professions, and it's a very rewarding experience.
And as you said there in that answer, you're no longer in the classroom, and I'd said in the introduction that you're now the owner of GGM Science Tutors. So can you just say a wee bit about how they operate and the area that they operate in?
Yeah, of course. So for me, as much as I've loved the classroom, I always knew that at some point I wanted to do something outside of that. So about 7 years ago, I decided to dabble in the world of business with no experience, no degrees, or no knowledge of how to run a business. Tried it for a couple of years and failed. And then about 3 months later, opened a new business. And this time I thought I'd learn from my mistakes, and not give up on any circumstances. So I was a full-time teacher, developing the business as my side hustle. Did that for 2 years until it just about got to the point where I could relinquish a little bit of time at school, drop down from 5 days to 3 days. That then really allowed it to accelerate with the extra time, drop down from 3 days to 2 days, stop being a head of department. And then this time last year, I was able to hand my notice in. And now this is all I do. And the company I run went from being essentially just me tutoring students, to hiring a few tutors, to now being a team of 70. So there are 70 tutors, there are 300 students we serve a week, and I don't do any of the tutoring myself now. I hire, I manage, and I deal with all marketing and all sales. So it's a bit different from my role in the classroom, but it uses my knowledge of the curriculum. Parents always ring me and they want to know sort of what tutor to have for their child, how it all works, and my knowledge of teaching for years means I can help and I can hire people that I know are good, because when I see good teachers, I know it.
And is that just throughout England that you operate, or are you spread out throughout the UK?
It's throughout the whole UK. I mean, it was supposed to be only the UK, but we've had clients from all across the globe contact us. We've got clients in I think Mauritius. We've got clients in New Zealand, Dubai. We've had clients in Russia in the past. No marketing sort of push for these countries, but it just so happens that they found out about us. They're doing our curriculum, and they wanted someone that was a specialist in science, and that's what we've done. So they found us.
And there's lots of great messages in what you're saying that I just want to make sure are pointed out. So one of the ones was when you were talking about setting up the tutoring business, and I thought this was very important. You said you failed to begin with and then tried again, and have obviously made a success. And I think that's something really important for people to learn about is, when you fail, don't give up. You can keep 100%. Going. But the other thing that you'd said earlier on about why you became a high school science teacher was you were able to combine your passions of working with people and engaging with people, as well as your passion for science. Now, as a rapping science teacher, you've obviously now combined two other passions of rap music and science teaching. But before we talk about that, here's an excerpt of Matt, the rapping science teacher.
Let's dive right in, I'll tear it apart. 4 chambers, let's look at them all. Twittriums and 2 ventricles. Left side big and right side is small. Count with me 4 blood vessels. Let me explain to you how this works. Blood without O2 enters first into the right through the vena cava. Then it goes here, you see this atria. Now to the ventricle sharply. Needs to get out the pulmonary artery. From there it goes to the lungs. It's got O2, so blood takes some. Now back to the heart again. This time through the pulmonary vein. Now the left side pumps way stronger and sends to the body out the aorta.
So What led to you actually starting off as the rapping science teacher? What got you on that journey?
So that's an interesting one. So early in my days of getting the company JGM really started to steamroll forwards, um, I sort of thought I can't ignore this social media thing that everyone's talking about. I can't keep my head in the sand. I've got to get in it. So I got on Instagram and started putting posts out to do with science and really researching and learning. You've got to know your audience and you've got to do posts that add value and capture that audience. So I did that for a little while. I think we went from 100 followers to something like 1,000 or 2,000. And then I think one day I was walking. I think I was walking with one of my sons in the park. There's a song we were listening to, and I thought, this is a catchy song. I think it was actually Old Town Road by Lil Nas X at the time, which is not a rap song, but it was catchy, a very catchy song. And I thought, this is catchy. Everyone seems to like this at the moment, and people remember the lyrics. I think people, that was it. I remember hearing a news article about people wanting that song playing at their funeral, and I was just like, songs really resonate with people and they remember the words of these songs. I wonder if I can tie science to this. The idea was on my mind. I benched it for a year. I didn't do anything for a year. And then after a year, I thought, I've got to do this. TikTok wasn't even a thing when I first thought of it, that people really knew about. The pandemic hit, TikTok seemed to rise, it seemed to be all about dancing and music. And I thought, it's now or never. This idea I had 12 months ago, I can't let it stretch any longer. I've just got to go all at it. So I started about a month-long process of taking the textbook on biology from cells, getting a song from Stormzy, and just continually writing and practicing till I had something decent. And I put that on the business Instagram at the start. And it resonated with people. People seemed to like it. More students than parents. But I thought, I'm onto something here. I can keep going. So I kept going. It really didn't get the traction I thought it would for a very long time. I think it went from 1,500 views the first video to something like 700 views the second video. Comments were positive, but it wasn't getting the traction I thought it would until one day when I was on TikTok myself. I thought, some videos I'm watching, some videos I'm swiping. The videos I'm swiping tend to be adverts. And I thought maybe my raps look like adverts. So I reformatted them to stop them looking like an advert for the company. And it just seemed like a silly little idea. I'm not really changing much. Change it from white to black, get rid of the logo, start in a different place. Yep, as I thought, wishful thinking, 400 views. Yep, that's it, maxed out. Next morning, 800 views. Oh, that was massive for me at the time. I was like, it's doubled, but must have been a fluke. 1,200 views. I went to tell my wife, I was like, this can't be viral, can it? 2,000, 4,000, 8,000. And at the time, absolutely huge for me, ended on 50,000 views, which for me at that particular moment was crazy. And then I thought, let me reformat. Another video I thought was quite good, 200,000 views the next day. Well, this can't happen again. Next day, reformat my favorite one, and that got 800,000 views. And following went from 121, I remember the number, 121 followers on, I think it was a Monday on a half term. And by Wednesday, I was at 21,000. And it wasn't just the following and the views, it's the comments. The comments were phenomenal. I always saw TikTok as a place where you'd get ripped apart. Who's this old-timer teacher that thinks he's cool? Who's this idiot? This guy's rubbish. Those comments, couldn't find them. It was just like, this guy saved my life. These are amazing. I love this. Please make more. It's probably about 99% positive comments. So much so I couldn't even see the negative comments because they'd get washed away. So I knew I was onto something then, and I kept it going. And at that point, a few months later, I thought, you know what? I'm going to separate the business from the rapping science teacher. So the rapping science teacher became its own entity, totally separate from JGM. JGM serves bill-paying parents. People call, they want a tutor for their child, and we provide that. The rapping science teacher, totally separate enterprise, that will always be free, and that's for students who either have tutoring or their parents simply can't afford it, and that will always be free for them. You know, I get paid from that because of social posts and show bookings and all sorts of other things that come my way now. But they're essentially two separate businesses. One fee paying, one will always be free.
And it's amazing how that took off for you. And the pandemic was great for creativity for all sorts of people. I mean, it's what forced me
Yeah.
to start my channel as well. Although doing something very different from yourself and not hitting the 800,000 views per video. But we're all working in different niches, but the creativity's been really good from the pandemic. But now that we've looked at what you do and the degrees that got you there, I'm going to go back into your past. What actually first got this passion in STEM going for you? Where did your first interest come from?
Oh gosh, I always remember, even in primary school, loving how things work. I've always been a tech nerd from day one. I always feel like science teachers, we fall in a similar brackets. We've got to love Star Trek. We're supposed to love Star Wars. I always feel guilty that I don't. There are all these things, Ghostbusters, that we're supposed to love. And that's been me from a childhood age. So yeah, in primary school, I liked science. In secondary school, that love just skyrocketed. I always remember sort of, the body. It's made of cells. Oh, great. What are cells made of? Well, if you zoom in, cells, atoms are small. Oh, wow, atoms. What are atoms made from? Well, protons, neutrons, and electrons. What are they? I always wanted to dive deeper. One of the earliest questions I remember asking a teacher in school and them not being able to answer, once I just discovered what elements was, what elements are we made of? If we could simplify it. I don't think the teacher knew at the time, but years later, I was like, okay, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, sulfur, and a few other things. But back then, I wanted to know. It was always about diving deeper and finding out about more, essentially.
And do you think that the internet's actually made that easier now for people to be able to access this sort of information with their curiosity? So, like back when we were in school, it wasn't as prevalent and you didn't have all the same sources. Do you think that's helping people find out these answers and get more interested in STEM?
I think 100%. I always think computers and phones are like a double-edged sort of setup. It can be a gift and a curse. You put a phone in your hand, you can waste your life away on TikTok and social media, swiping, looking at things that have got no use. But at the same time, if you're disciplined, you can think, oh, I want to know more about this, or I want to learn this, I want to study this, I want to become this. And the phones and the computers are a fantastic tool. If you love STEM, you love space, you want to find something, everything is there. When we were in school, that wasn't there. You'd have to go to a library, and you're less likely to get distracted in the library. In all fairness, but it's harder to find the stuff that you want. You couldn't just type it in and get unlimited text on that issue, that point, or unlimited videos. Whereas nowadays you can.
And when you were going through this STEM journey and with all of your curiosity as well that was going on, did you have any STEM heroes that you looked up to or aspired to be like, or even encouraged you on your path?
Well, STEM heroes. Gosh, I remember my chemistry teacher at the time in school was a guy called Dr. Street, and he's an interesting character. And I suppose the way he taught chemistry, he just had wild energy. And I think the first lesson he taught atoms, he put his hand into this jar and pulled out what seemed like ball bearings. It's like, well, know what atoms are? These are atoms. And he just threw them over the whole classroom, thousands of them. He goes, right, capture every atom, put it back in this jar. We all picked them all up. We were like, yeah! Just running around the classroom, picking these atoms, putting them in the jar. And I don't think there was one left. And it seemed so different from all the other lessons that we had. And he kept this sort of way of doing things up for the whole term of teaching chemistry. And I don't know if I've ever done a good a job as him in teaching the subject. I'd like to think I was at least half as good. But yeah, he was pretty special in teaching the subject. Anyone else in terms of famous people? No one comes to mind at the moment. I'm sure in a few minutes someone's going to pop into mind. I'm going to say obviously, but I can say the standard scientists that we all know and love that we think are amazing. Of course, Darwin, Watson, and Crick, their discoveries. Darwin would probably be, without looking too deep into it, probably my number one, because I love genetics and I love evolution. And I love what he did. He went to the Galapagos Islands. He looked at different animals. He noticed the key things. Animals have different offspring. different traits. Some survive, ones of the good traits survive, so on and so forth. And he was crucified for his ideas, but he stuck with them. He stuck with them, and then only years later, people go, "Oh gosh, maybe we're a bit harsh on this guy because he was actually pretty much spot on." So yeah, so Darwin, and you know what? There is one other guy. Any people come to mind? Mendeleev, if I've got the scientist correct, for leaving gaps in the periodic table. I think it's one thing to to pick up something or to notice something and to study it and to work out how it works. There's a whole other thing altogether to leave gaps for something that doesn't exist on the assumption that they might exist later. That always blows my mind. Look, there's things that are there, you can see them, but guessing things that aren't there, that takes a special kind of brain.
Yeah, Mendeleev with that periodic table, and it was drawn in quantum mechanics as well to the equations. But you're right, it's incredible that you would leave a gap going, we don't know what that is, but we're pretty sure there's going to be something there at some point. And I think that's one of the great things about science is there's still so much left to be discovered. And on that note, there's obviously right now a lot of encouragement to try and get more girls into STEM, but also more people from different ethnic backgrounds to promote that sort of diversity of STEM. Now, as somebody from a BME group, is that something that is in your mind with what you do and being a public face out there with science teaching, or is that just kind of associated with what you do anyway?
It's a good point. You know, I don't see too many people that are mixed race or black on social media doing science related things. It's not a massive amount. There's one other kid coming up that is doing it. He's phenomenal. But it's, I don't know. I'm from dual heritage. You know, my mum was white, my dad was black, and you know, I do things for all kids. Obviously, you know, it's nice for kids that haven't sort of necessarily seen someone that looks like themselves and see me. They go, oh gosh, I haven't seen anyone that looks like that before. I can do it. So obviously I'm all for that. But for me, it's love of the subject, and I want to try and help as many students as I possibly can to learn from any and all backgrounds. That's this my number one thing. My MO is always make the subject easy to understand for kids that might struggle with the subject. Every rap I write and everything I design is always, it's not, oh, maybe your knowledge is there. No, I need to take it back a step. If you were really struggling with a subject, you don't like it, it doesn't make sense. I've got to try and engage from that point by picking things that you already know and understand and take the rap from there and understand. That was the logic I used in the classroom. Sometimes I'd make a lesson and I'd think, some of those kids might not be at that level. They might be at this level. And if I pitch it there, I've lost them. So it's about getting them at the right level, engaging their interests, and trying to apply it to real life, and then building from there. So that's how I approach things.
So that's a perfect point to lead into the final question of this interview. Have you got any advice for children or young people who may be interested in STEM or STEM subjects, but aren't sure what they can do with it or how to pursue it into the future?
Yeah, I would always say, look at what your favorite field is within STEM. So, some people absolutely love space and physics. Some students love the biology of things, the world around them. And it would be, like you said earlier, the internet is at your fingertips. The answer to pretty much all questions of things that have been discovered, you can find out. So it'd be about researching and diving deeper into that topic. There's loads of accounts on Twitter, Instagram, and now on TikTok as well that you can follow that are to do with science. There's Nature, the Royal Institution. There's absolutely tons, and they're littered with information on science topics that can feed that curiosity. And then I suppose there's a natural other question there. Is it just that is the student curious, or are they thinking of literally going down a career avenue in that path? And if you are, then it's absolutely possible. It's just about finding out what you need. And it'll always, of course, be starting with GCSE science. So you need to do as well as you can in those topics. And if you're struggling in those topics, but you like it, it's about finding ways and resources online that can help you learn better. And for me, it's always CGP books, BBC Bite Size. I'm not sponsored by these guys, by the way. This is literally my opinion. And using those resources to help you learn. And then of course after GCSEs, I would assume if going down the STEM route, depending on what you want, there's chemistry, biology, physics, psychology, and maths that you'd need to get before deciding your degree. But it's all about honing the areas that you like and finding out as much as you can, just for purely for the interest.
And that is a great point to end on. Matt, thank you very much for joining us today. As a final point, can you let everyone know where they can find the Rapping Science Teacher on the various social media platforms that you're on?
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much as well. So you can find me on TikTok and Instagram under @mattgreen.jgm, and you can find me on YouTube under mattgreenjgm. I'm also building at the moment Twitter, very early days. But yeah, Matt Green JGM, pretty much type in on search engines and you'll find my social accounts.
Tim's eyes are blue, but his folks are hazel. Is he adopted or was his mum unfaithful? To answer this, I'll have to show you Mendel. He once had fame before Kim and Kendall. Mendel worked out inheritance. He used pea plants as his evidence. For every feature, you have two genes. One from kings and one from queens.